This last line, it staggers me. That because groceries are expected to become so expensive, according to Mr. Carney's top government department, people may start to hunt, fish, and forage on public lands and waterways. Like it is just hard to believe when you read these words that this is about Canada.
The long-awaited, fully costed Conservative platform was released today, and the difference from Mark Carney's platform is significant to say the least. But the biggest surprise came when Pierre confirmed that the Privy Council office released a report with a frightening prediction should the Liberal policies continue in Canada, and it sounds like something out of a horror film.
Let's take a look.
The choice is this: a fourth Liberal term with Mark Carney, whose reckless Liberal plan will add even more debt than Trudeau, or a new Conservative government with a responsible plan to save $125 billion and put us back on the path to growth and security. This is my plan for change. First, we will cut the Liberal deficit by 70% by cutting back on bureaucracy, consultants, foreign aid to dictators, terrorists, and global bureaucracies, slashing money for special interests, and unleashing $500 billion of extra economic growth by unlocking the power of our resources and home building. We will, thank you. Now, in the past, I've told you that there would be a dollar for dollar law. Every dollar of new spending would need to be matched with a dollar of savings. We've gone even further. Every dollar of new spending in our platform, especially for things like defense, will be met with $1.50 in savings in other areas. We will cut consulting fees that the government pays by $10 billion annually and almost $20 billion over the term. Gradually and through attrition, without mass layoffs, we will wind down the cost of the bureaucracy by hiring back only 2 people for every 3 who voluntarily retire. We'll cut back on foreign aid by roughly 1/3 so that we no longer give money to terrorists, dictators, and global bureaucracy. The money will go to frontline people in need. We will And we will also pass this spending discipline in law so that going forward, every time a politician or bureaucrat comes up with an idea to spend more money, they will need to find the exact amount or more in savings before the idea will even be considered. This is how single moms, small businesses, and seniors make their decisions. Whenever I spend money, I will think of it as my mother's money, a retired teacher. If she would not be happy with it coming out of her retirement funds, then I should not be happy spending it. Canadians have been pinching their pennies long enough. It's time for government to start pinching pennies as well.
This is exactly the kind of fiscally responsible budget that this country needs desperately.
Right. Especially after the last 10 years of spending with reckless abandon, and I mean reckless.
Well, and the unfortunate part is that many people that you may talk to in real life or online don't seem to understand that these government deficits become our problem as taxpayers.
Right. They say, well, you know, it's the government's money. It doesn't affect me. Well, actually it does, because the issue is that the more the government spends and the more debt that we rack up, that means the more interest charges that we actually have to pay on that. Now, we've said many times that the interest charges our loan is almost $1 billion every single week that we as the taxpayers have to pay the banks in order to actually service this debt. So if they keep spending, guess what happens? Those interest charges continue to go up, and they need to actually figure out to get some to actually get some money to pay for those. And how do they get that? Taxes.
Right. Government raises taxes, or they print more money, which fuels inflation. And then when inflation goes up, the Bank of Canada is forced to put interest rates up.
It's like this. If you have 2 credit cards and you rack up, a $2,000 or $3,000 credit card bill on one of them, and then you start paying off just the interest from that credit card with your other credit card, guess what happens? Now you're going into debt even faster. So this is what we're talking about here. And I love that they're going to enshrine this dollar for now, $1.50 law in legislation, because if they get in and they actually put this into law, you're going to have a government, if they want to actually get away from that, they're going to have to pass legislation to broadcast to Canadians across the country. By the way, everybody, we intend not to be fiscally responsible, so we are going to put in legislation to repeal this fiscally responsible legislation. They will be broadcasting to everybody that we have every intent of not being responsible with your money. And that will send warning signs across this country to Canadians about what government is actually looking to do that, no matter the color.
And what do the Conservatives mean by being responsible with Canadians' tax dollars? Well, it means not spending 60 million, not 60,000, $60 million on an ArriveCan app. It means not spending, $400 million on the SDTC scandal to companies that were owned by friends of Liberals that are conflicts of interest.
And that's just what we know of.
Right. It means not sending money overseas for things like Sex Work, the musical. It means not wasting Canadians' taxpayer dollars. It means not spending our money on things that they wouldn't spend their personal money on.
Right. Now, in setting the context for this, Pierre referred to a Privy Council office, or PCO, report that gives a frightening future of what would happen if Mark Carney continued, and if he was elected, and if he continued and even escalated the spending legacy of Justin Trudeau. Take a look at this.
And it is a very dangerous future if the Liberals get their 4th term. And this isn't just my words. It's Mark Carney's own government department. Just a week ago, we learned that one of the departments of the government, the Privy Council office, has made some very depressing predictions about the way the country is headed after a decade of Liberal rule. I'm going to quote directly from this Privy Council report. In 2040, upward mobility is almost unheard of in Canada, they predict. Hardly anyone believes they can build a better life for themselves or their children through their own efforts, and many worry about sliding down the social order. It forecasts more people may struggle to afford rent, bills, and groceries. Resulting stress could worsen mental health challenges. This would increase demand for social services. And then there's some specific forecasts that the current Liberal government is making about our future. In 2040, owning a home is not a realistic goal for many. Inequality between those who rent and those who own has become a key driver of social, economic, and political conflict. The report goes on to say that people may lose faith in the Canadian project altogether. It forecasts that many will leave the country to avoid this rising cost and declining opportunity. And they believe that it will lead to a mental health crisis. More people will emigrate to jurisdictions where they believe upward mobility and or higher standards of living are easier to obtain. Quote, if young workers leave Canada, it may become harder to pay for the systems that support a growing number of older people. It says things are so bad that, and this is a quote, I'm quoting from the government here, if I had said this myself, you would have thought it was outlandish, but this is the government's own predictions about how bad things are headed right now. People may start to hunt, fish, and forage on public lands and waterways because they can't afford groceries anymore. This isn't my prediction. This is where the country is headed if we continue down the Liberal track. It sounds incredible, something from the post-apocalyptic TV show like Fallout or The Last of Us, but this is the forecast from Prime Minister Carney's own government department, the Privy Council office.
Now, as always, we wanted to make sure that what Pierre was referring to actually existed, because these are some pretty crazy claims.
Right. And I mean, people hunt and fish for their food sometimes now, but I think it's more of a sport or a hobby than out of necessity.
Right. It's a little different in the north when you have the Inuit communities. They actually do. They hunt and fish out of necessity, but that's because that during the winter months, you're not getting any shipments of food from down south, so you need something to eat. So, but this is talking about across Canada. This isn't talking just the northern communities, folks.
This is talking about like cities is what it sounds like.
So we wanted to make sure that this report actually existed. And guess what? It does. Ladies and gentlemen, Government of Canada, Policy Horizons Canada. The report is titled Future Lives, Social Mobility in Question. Here's the section that Pierre is referring to, section 3.4. People might find alternative ways to meet their basic needs. Housing, food, childcare, and healthcare cooperatives may become more common. This could ease burdens on social services, but also challenge market-based businesses. Forms of person-to-person exchange of goods and services could become even more popular, reducing tax revenues and consumer safety.
So bartering, essentially.
People may start to hunt, fish, and forage on public lands and waterways without reference to regulations. Small-scale agricultural could increase. Governments may come to seem irrelevant if they cannot enforce basic regulations or if people increasingly rely on grassroots solutions to meet basic needs. This is where things get even more concerning, because this starts to talk about social unrest. People may reject systems they believe have failed them, section 3.6. People who work hard but see little reward may look for others to blame. You think? Some may blame AI, big tech, CEOs, social media, unions, or capitalism. They could demand tighter regulations, tax penalties, or profound revisions of certain systems. Some may blame the state, aka the Government of Canada, or the provincial governments. They may attack policies believed to favor older cohorts who benefited from the era of social mobility.
Well, we're seeing that starting now.
We are. In extreme cases, people could reject the state's legitimacy, leading to higher rates of tax evasion or other forms of civil disobedience. Some may choose to blame those with capital, whether it is social, economic, or decision-making capital. Others may choose to blame immigrants or other identifiable groups. If such scapegoating becomes widespread, it could generate serious social or political conflicts.
So this report is basically saying that if things continue the way they are, and especially under Carney, society could start falling apart at the seams.
Right. This, and again, this isn't out of a some sort of science fiction novel. This isn't, the next season script of Fallout, everybody.
No, this is the Privy Council office report.
So they can't say that this is conservative fear-mongering. This is literally coming out of the current Liberal government.
I mean, I don't want to live in a Canada like that.
No, I don't think anybody does.
No.
So let's take a look at what the difference really is in spending between Mark Carney's government and Pierre Poilievre's. So this is our analysis of the 4-year spending plan between Mark Carney and Pierre Poilievre's governments. The numbers that you see are essentially the deficit spending numbers. So what does that mean? That means anything that puts the government budget into the negative, so not balanced. So in year one, which is 25-26, Mark Carney wants to run a $62.3 billion deficit.
Which is pretty much what the Liberals ran last year.
Well, but they forecasted something like a $40 million deficit under Justin Trudeau's next budget. So even though the actual budget from 24-25 came out to $60 billion, Trudeau was saying, well, don't worry, we're going to be only running like a $42 billion deficit next year. Mark Carney is actually forecasting that they're going to be running a $62.3 billion budget. And what have we seen with Liberal spending? It always goes higher. So it could be even higher than that. Versus Pierre Poilievre, who is forecasting a $31.4 billion deficit.
Now, you might be asking, why do the Conservatives have a deficit at all? And this just goes to show the state of the finances that they are inheriting from the Liberal government.
Right. So what they're going to have to do is starting to wind down programs in order to avoid shocking the system. But they're also going to be cutting a whole bunch of programs immediately and funding in order to actually fund a lot of the breaks that they want to give people.
Now, when people hear that, oh, the Conservative government is going to be cutting programs, they freak out. They think things like healthcare or maybe education. But so far, the Conservatives have told us what they're going to be cutting is waste, number one, and things like foreign aid to, again, programs like Sex Work the Musical. Back in, was it January perhaps, that we had done a video about all these wasteful things that the government is spending money on, our money, our tax dollars. And they're sending money to foreign nations to get them to invest in plays about LGBTQ+. I mean, great, if you want to do plays about that kind of stuff, that's fine, but why are you spending Canadians' tax dollars in order to get that accomplished?
So now we move on to 26-27, 27-28, and 28-29. And you can see that even though Mark Carney's deficits are going down, they're not going down to a significant degree. They only go down only by $15 billion in the fourth year. Whereas if you look at Pierre Poilievre's plan, they're actually approaching a balanced budget. So they go from 31.5 to 23.6 to $14.2 billion in deficit spending in the last year. So what does that all come up to? Ladies and gentlemen, the 4-year plan from Mark Carney, he wants to add $225 billion onto the already ridiculous government debt, versus Pierre Poilievre's plan, which adds, quote unquote, only around $100 billion to the government debt over the next 4 years. The difference between the two platforms is the Conservatives are actively saying we are aiming for a balanced budget and we are aiming to start paying down some of that debt because they have to get these interest charges going the other way. Just
like it's not good for a household to carry endless amounts of debt, it is not good for a government to carry endless amounts of debt either.
So that's the big difference in terms of these platforms. Now, the media was kind of shocked by some of these claims from this PCO report and the differences between the two platforms. Toronto Sun ended up asking Pierre a question about this, so let's take a look.
Mr. Poilievre, Joe Warmington from the Toronto Sun and Post Media.
Hey, Joe.
Nice to be here today. And
thank you.
I would be remiss as a reporter to not talk about what you talked about, and I want to talk about the platform, but just before that, you mentioned about this report out of the Privy Council.
Yeah.
Now, as a crime reporter, if you will, when I hear something like that, I cannot believe what I've heard. And it's such a stark contrast to what you talked about in your platform. But I do want to go back, if you can address that, how that's going to help fix it. But that is the most negative thing in my 40 years in journalism that I've ever heard about Canada. I don't see it too many places in the media, and I think it can't be glossed over. So I'd like to talk about that and how you're going to fix that if you win on next week.
I think you're absolutely right. I'm shocked that, like, this is not an interest group or an opinion columnist or even a think tank that has put out this report. It is not even just a government department. It is the Prime Minister's personal department. Like, I think somebody has to ask Mark Carney, has he seen this report? His department wrote it. And what they are anticipating on the current trajectory is a total meltdown, a societal breakdown in Canada if we stay on the current track. Why this isn't blazing the front pages of every news outlet in the country right now is beyond me. Look, it's just unbelievable. Unbelievable. Like, it blows my mind. What they're actually saying is that, I'm just going to read some of these. More people, this is for the future. It's not enough for Mr. Carney to say, oh, well, the last 10 years is in the past, forget about it. Stop bothering me about the past, he will say. This is the predicted future his department foresees for Canada. More people may struggle to afford rent, bills, or groceries. The resulting stress could worsen mental health challenges. This would increase demand on social services. In 2040, upward social mobility is almost unheard of in Canada. Hardly anyone believes that they can build a better life for themselves or their children through their own efforts. Many worry about sliding down the social order. In 2040, owning a home is not a realistic goal for many. Inequality between those who rent and those who own has become a key driver of social, economic, and political conflict. In 2040, pursuing a post-secondary education is no longer considered a reliable path to social mobility. Fewer young people choose post-secondary education, and those who do see it less as a path to a successful career than a way to reinforce their membership in the, quote, elite. That's not my words. That's the government's words. The reports paints a terrifying picture of a spiral of economic depression and cost inflation. People may lose faith in the Canadian project, it says. It forecasts that this may trigger people to, quote, emigrate to jurisdictions where they perceive upward social mobility or other higher standards of living are easier to obtain. If young workers leave, it may become harder to pay for our social programs for the older people in the country. And then this last line, it staggers me. That because groceries are expected to become so expensive, according to Mr. Carney's top government department, people may start to hunt, fish, and forage on public lands and waterways. Like, it is just hard to believe when you read these words that this is about Canada.
I agree. And that's not the Canada that we want to be raising our son in, and that's not the Canada that Canadians want to be living in.
No, this is not the Canada that I grew up in. This is not the Canada that I love. I mean, we didn't start Northern Perspective, I don't know, just because we wanted something to do. We started this channel because we love our country and we want to give our son the same opportunity that we had growing up. To grow up in a safe country, to grow up in a country where he can literally do anything. And if this comes true, I don't know what kind of country Canada is going to turn into. And we're going to do everything in our power to stop it from turning into this post-apocalyptic nightmare. Like, I'm so upset I can't even talk. And again, this is not just like conspiracy theories coming from the Conservative Party. This is from the Privy Council office. So they are identifying these issues or these potential issues if things don't change.
Right. So where's all the headlines? Mainstream media? Where are they?
But I don't believe that Canada is beyond saving. I think that we can all do our civic duty and vote. I think that we can all hold the next government to account, no matter who it is. And I think that the power of the people will triumph.
Well, and I keep coming back to this. If our forefathers were able to pick up a rifle and go to fight tyranny in Germany in the 1940s and in the early 1900s, then, you know, we can pick up a pen, we can get on our feet, we can write some emails, we can stand up for this country. It's not too much to ask. So we are committed to doing whatever we can in order to make that positive reality, that optimistic reality, come true. But there's also one other thing that we wanted to highlight as part of this, and it's inside the platform that the Conservatives released, which you can find in the sources section of our description, as always. But this is something that really hits close to our home. So this is the first page of the Conservative platform, and it's just called Change. You know, for an affordable life, for safe streets, for Canada First. Partway down, they actually talk about something specific that is going to be very personal to many Canadians, and it's personal for us.
So you may recall that healthcare is primarily a provincial responsibility. However, the Conservatives have put this in their costed platform, and this is what they can do to help support family caregivers and Canadians with special needs that is within their boundaries, within their jurisdiction, because again, they can't reach into the provincial jurisdiction, but it seems like they're doing what they can to help caregivers as well as Canadians with special needs. It says, every family deserves support. We will provide real help for caregivers and Canadians with disabilities so no one is left behind by making the caregiver tax credit refundable, by renaming and streamlining the disability tax credit to certification of disability, and make access automatic for related benefits. If you have ever had to do the paperwork for the disability tax credit, it is quite cumbersome. So this sounds like it will make it automatic so families don't have to go through that process. They will also be funding 1,000 autism support worker training spots annually to better support students, families, and schools. As parents with a child in the education system, we're being told that our son cannot have the support that he needs because the funding's just not there. People don't want to do the work. They don't have enough workers, etc., etc. Pretty much every excuse under the sun. This sounds like it's going to help make that better. And the final point, doubling the reach of the Ready, Willing, and Able program, helping 4,000 Canadians with autism or intellectual disabilities find and keep jobs. So again, this is something that is very personal for Northern Perspective, as our son is on the autism spectrum. And this is the only party that I've seen has promised something at the federal level for supporting autism and people with special needs, with disabilities. And this is in addition to Bill S-203 that the Conservative caucus had implemented and has received royal assent, I believe it was last year.
So does this fix every problem? No. There's going to be a lot of people saying, well, what about this? What about that? And even autism. Would we like to see a heck of a lot more in here? Yes, we would.
But again, autism falls primarily under healthcare, which is provincial responsibility. So I feel like this is definitely a step in the right direction for the federal government. They're doing what they can to help at the federal level.
And they're not going to be able to fix everything in one term, folks. This has taken 2.5 terms for Justin Trudeau to wreak havoc on Canada. So it's going to take at least that long to reverse much of the damage that he put in. So this is the platform. We encourage you to take a look at it, have a read. There's a lot of misinformation about the Conservative platform that is going on social media. Now you have some actual documents that you can screenshot and give these people to combat that. But the number one thing that we need people to do, if you haven't already, be prepared to vote on Monday, April the 28th, because that is going to be one of the most important days in this country's history in recent memory. So get out and vote, and let's make this platform happen, because we already know what the future looks like, and we want something a lot brighter.